Yeah, okay, so don't mind me. I'm just getting some of that safety equipment out just in case we need to take some of this on the road. So I thought we'd cover emergency planning again, and I'm going to jump around between the dramatic emergencies and then just the typical garden variety. The big ones are going to be a lot easier to imagine because they're the ones that make it into the books, they're the ones that make it into the movies. But most of the planning is the same. You're going to need the same things for personal emergencies that you would need for the dramatic kind. In one of the early flashbacks from the book The Road by Cormac McCarthy, the man is filling the bathtub with water. He's collecting all the tap water that he can, and that's pretty common advice for immediate disaster response. So you know that this is the day of the disaster. The man is doing something to make sure his family is safe, or at least safer. He's preparing on the fly. I won't spoil it for you if you haven't read the book or watched the movie, but you know by the title that he eventually sets out on the road with his son, and he had to choose what to take. This is not your typical prepper porn, so it's not going to detail his kit for 15 pages. You just get it in small glimpses. He has a few books to read to his son, he has his wallet, and he has a pretty limited self-defense budget. We'll just leave it at that. He doesn't have much that's valuable, and things aren't exactly easy for them. I was a new parent the first time I read that book, so I think it probably sunk in a little bit deeper. I don't honestly expect any scenario where it gets so bad that I'll be walking cross country with my family, but that idea of what to grab and how to build up valuable assets for emergency needs, well, that's a topic that I obviously think about a fair amount. I've already made a handful of videos on this. And this is not a survival channel, so I won't detail a kit or self-defense budget here either, but I'll say that it makes sense to have certain things easily available. And gold for me is one of those things, simply because you can pack so much value into a small space. Now, that wouldn't have helped the man and his son from the book, but like I said, I'm going to jump around a little bit between realistic emergencies and then, well, the apocalypse. Now, you can consider the SHTF metaphor to be that worldwide life-threatening scenario, or you can just dial it back. Maybe it's a localized natural disaster. Maybe it's a stock market crash or a personal emergency. Maybe you just had all your money invested in Dogecoin and then you lost your passwords. Whatever it is, though, the preparedness takeaway is pretty much the same. You should have some hard assets that prevent you from having to hit the road with nothing. So speaking of those hard assets, I talked with Lior Gantz recently, and I put that question to him of how he'd spend $40,000 of imaginary investment capital right now. And he mentioned holding half that in cash because he expected to see some buying opportunities coming up. But I know Lior, and you'll catch it if you watch that video, I followed up that question by mentioning that Lior already had a base of metals as savings or as a start over fund, however you want to look at it. And his reply to that was that everyone should have metals as a base of savings first. He's saying to do that before you jump into any speculative assets, any speculative investments. And that isn't easy advice to follow. There are a few cases where that won't even apply. If you have an employer willing to match your investment contributions to a retirement account, for instance, well, I would say take advantage of that as early and as often as you can. Not only do you get free money there, you're going to have the compounding effect because you're investing early. So I don't know if saving and investing need to be linear. You can always do both and then just split whatever capital you have between the two. And the reason, again, is that investing early just has that compounding effect. And in the earlier video that led to that question, I had said that I'd allocate my imaginary $40,000 by putting about $20,000 into the market. Now, I wasn't saying just putting it into a market index fund. I would actually go very specific. I gave the example of Apple stock, and then I would split the remaining $20,000 between gold and cryptocurrency. Now, that was about 3 weeks ago, by the way, and crypto is so volatile that I always need to mention timing, and it has absolutely nothing to do with emergency planning. But like I said in that video, I already have a base of savings in both cash and metals, so I'm not really behind in any one category. So if I was just starting out, I'd probably be relatively similar. I'd be half and half at that allocation, half invested and half saved. So with that in mind, crypto would be the first to go. And I'm only in on those volatile investments if I have a very solid start-over fund to begin with. That fund that would allow me to cover unexpected expenses. Now in that video, there were a lot of comments from people thinking that a tube of buffaloes was the way to go. And I'm definitely not here to tell you that that's a bad idea. I can't tell you where any of those commenters are with other savings or other investments, but $40,000 in metals would be a great base for that start-over fund. And this is what that $40,000 in metals would look like, by the way. This is 21 ounces of gold, and you could definitely take this with you if you needed to hit that metaphorical road or you needed to hit the real one. Now, I picked up a Buffalo yesterday. I still don't have a full tube. I had to actually sneak a Britannia in here just to make it look complete. Don't tell anyone. But this would be an easy thing to pack. Now, American Gold Eagles would take up even less space for me since they don't really need capsules. I can just keep them in a mint tube. But either way, you've got a lot of value in a small space. For the record, I'm definitely not saying that everyone needs $40,000 in metals in case of an emergency. Everyone's going to have a different idea of where they need to be or where they want to be. And I doubt many people just go out and buy that whole amount in one shot. And then there's the question of what form to buy. Now, there are a lot of considerations here, but I think the most obvious is probably the size of the coins, whether or not you should buy fractional. And this is a topic that always comes up, but I don't have strong feelings on what size is best in an emergency personally. Whatever you think is best for you for easy liquidation is probably correct. I've never had trouble selling 1 ounce coins, and I don't see a particularly strong case for needing smaller incremental sales, but I get the idea behind thinking that it would be easier to sell smaller coins, or at least having that flexibility. If it's worth the extra premium to you, go for it. For most people, it's not actually a question of what's best to have. The decision is made more on budget. If it's easier to buy those fractional coins and that keeps you on track, there's really not much of a debate. That is the best way to go. I don't have enough quarters to show what a large amount would look like, but they'd also be very easy to grab and go if you had to evacuate for any reason, and the value is clear whether you have to hit the road or not. And again, I'm using that road more as a metaphor here than anything, but I think it's useful to consider what you would grab in an emergency. If you had to leave everything except what you could carry, or maybe what you could fit in a car, what would you take? And would it be enough to get you through more than a few days? Even though I don't think I'll be forced to bug out cross country, I think it's good to have emergency funds, to have emergency supplies, and then most importantly, just to have a plan. Now, there's a point here where this goes from logical planning to just being a fun mental exercise, but I have hiking gear, I have camping gear, and I will take that anytime I head to the mountains, and I keep that together in packs. And basically, I don't want to get somewhere and realize that I forgot a flashlight and it's now 6 hours away. And if I had to leave my house, whether that was because of flooding, fire, whatever it was, any kind of natural disaster, those packs would have a lot of what I'd need. I have solar chargers in there for phones. I have ultralight camp stoves for coffee or food. I have a lot of other things just to keep everyone safe. And I don't know what the situation is, if you're sleeping in a car or a campground or outside. I kind of doubt that that would ever happen, but all of those things are particularly useful. And in any case that I can think of where I need to leave the house, well, I'd be grabbing the gold that I had at that house. Now, really the point here is that it's one of the most important emergency supplies that I have. It's portable, it's non-perishable, it's a fantastic asset. A silver works to a certain extent too, but $40,000 in silver, well, I guess that would be well over 100 pounds of metal. So regardless of whether you're packing up a car to head out or you're just wanting to get it to the local shop to liquidate, it's a much different experience than grabbing a tube of gold. So what's your point? This one is pretty easy. You don't have to be a hardcore prepper to think through what you might need for an emergency. And you don't have to act like the end of the world as we know it is right around the corner. A little bit of planning, setting aside some savings and the right assets might have a profound impact on just how serious an actual emergency becomes. Oh, and make sure you pick up one of those solar power banks if your plan is to barter with Dogecoin. They sell them on Amazon and they've gotten pretty good. Okay, that's it. So let us know what you think. Is it emergency planning for you or just simple savings? Maybe it's just something shiny to collect. Let us know. And while you're there, be sure to hit the like button and make sure you're subscribed if you enjoy the content. And if you're still here, thanks again for watching. I always appreciate your time. Take care.